Hello everybody. Quick question for the long-term drone owners among you. Do you find that you get as nervous when you're flying your drone as you did when you first got the drone? I do. Panic every single time, and nothing's ever happened. I've never crashed or anything, but I just think it could plummet out of the sky and hit a child on the head, for example. Massive lawsuit, end of my life, is what I end up thinking. I mean, unlikely here. I'd be quite unlucky, I think, if I hit a child on the head, given I can't see a single human being, but could hit a sheep. It might just be me. So yeah, plan for this week's video was that I was going to sit in my office and reel off a list of photography mistakes, as I've done a few times before. And I had the list of mistakes ready, and just before I started recording, I thought, no, that is rubbish. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've realised that actually there really aren't that many photography mistakes. I mean, if you've got an intention for a photo in your mind, a vision of how you want a photo to look, and you go out and you achieve that look, that exact result that you had in your mind, then it's impossible that you've made any kind of mistake. And I think all too often blog posts and videos and workshops and magazine articles that talk about things like photography mistakes and how to improve your photography, how to get better photos, all those kinds of things, I think they end up diluting people's personal visions, people's individual ideas, people's unique creativity. And I think there's a danger that if people take videos and articles like that too seriously, then yeah, you end up losing your own voice and you end up creating photos that are just more in line with other people's opinions than photos that could be great and your own work, I think is what ends up happening. So basically, I decided not to film that video, is the short of it. And instead, I decided to come out for a walk along here, and I found this barn, which is very nice. So I'm gonna try and get a photo of it, is the plan. I imagine though, for a couple of reasons that I'll explain, that the drone photo I got will be my favorite. Just an opinion though, you might think otherwise, and that's fine. So yeah, I think going forward, I'm definitely gonna try and be a bit more aware of creating content that could end up diluting people's visions of, well, just their own photography and their own styles, basically. I've always tried to avoid it, but I think I'm becoming more and more conscious of just how important that is. I mean, I think I can definitely still make content that helps people avoid mistakes. And by mistakes, I mean differences between people's intentions and results. So for example, if you end up underexposing your photo by 5 stops and you didn't mean to, then that can be classed as a mistake. And I think there are ways to avoid things like that. I mean, that one's quite an obvious one. I don't think I can make a whole video about that, but you get the idea. Also, in case you haven't guessed, I'm in the Peak District for the 800th time this year. I mean, I do live here, so that does make sense. But since the world decided to close, I've not really made many videos elsewhere. Although next week, Emily and I are going on holiday, and I'm bringing you along with me. So that'll be a good bit of fun and a nice change. Right then, this barn. As I mentioned, I suspect that the photo that I got with the drone is going to be my favourite, which is not often the case, to be honest, but I'll explain why I think it'll be my favourite. Just get you off of here. Ugh. So, elements that I'd like to include in this photo are the barn, as you might expect, this wonderful tree that's right next to it, and this sweeping road that goes all the way up here. The problem that I've got is that if I want to include any of that road, I need to be somewhere over here and shooting back this way. As you can see though, the hill sort of, it runs out. So I can't stand here, which is where I'd need to stand to get a view all the way down to that road and an unobstructed view at the barn from kind of behind that tree. That's the issue. The drone doesn't have a problem with that, obviously, because the drone doesn't need to stand on a hill. It can hover. And that, in short, is why I think the photo that I got with the drone is going to be the best option. However, I'm going to go down and explore and just check that that's definitely the case. Where did that come from? I've just finished packing my bag and it started throwing it down over there, and it's definitely coming this way because I can feel it. That's annoying. Right, before it gets here, I am going to go into manual mode. I've got the wide angle lens on, 8-18. Manual mode, manual focus. I'm going to manually select my exposure, which I've done. Aperture of 7.1, shutter speed of 100th of a second, ISO 200, and I'm just going to try and get enough shots to capture all the elements of the photo that I want, that I spoke about. So the tree, the barn, and the road. And hopefully this will end up a decent competitor to the drone shot, which I imagine I must have shown you by now. But I got water all over the lens. Yep, good, good, good. Going well so far. If you ever see just a heap of a person lying on the ground in a national park somewhere wearing this colour jacket, please come and help me. It's definitely me. Right, I reckon if I head this way and see how high I can get on the hill while still being able to see that road. I think actually the solution is probably what I just did, which is take multiple shots and get a pano. Yeah, so I need to be higher because the road's disappeared, but I can't go too far that way because then the tree will hide the barn. It's all irrelevant at this point, to be honest, because like I said, the landscape has gone rubbish. No! This was not forecast. Well, I much prefer the look of the barn from this angle and this trajectory. I think it offers a lot more being a bit lower down. Sadly, can't say the same for the road. The road's disappeared behind this little mound here. Maybe it's the case that at this location you can't have it all. Right, unless I find something in the next 30 seconds, I think we'll cut back to the office and I'll show you how I edited the drone shot. Now the barn's gone behind that mound. I think the drone shot wins, but I'll stick it up against the pano that I got with the wide angle. Back to the studio.
Well, that went well, didn't it? It has gone a bit better since I got home. So I have now processed the two photos that I was talking about, the drone photo and the panorama. And actually, turns out I prefer the panorama for a couple of reasons that I'll explain very briefly. The drone shot, I think personally, just looks like a photo of a barn and a landscape and some hills in not particularly interesting conditions, to be honest. And the conditions is what makes the panorama shot much more interesting. So here it is, the panorama shot. And yeah, I just think, particularly with the way I've edited it, this makes for a photo that's much more about something as opposed to the drone shot, which I just think is of the landscape. And as I've spoken about a lot on this channel, that's the name of the game when trying to make good photos. Make them about something, not just of something. I think this does that more. And yeah, I'll talk you through how I've edited it. I hate saying that. Before I do, very quickly, a very quick thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Skillshare is an amazing online platform for learning all kinds of things from web development, entrepreneurship, creative writing, animation, the list goes on, loads and loads of stuff. I've taken classes in business development, essentialism, video production. I'm now doing a class that's all about InDesign, the Adobe software InDesign, so that I can design the next book in an appropriate program as opposed to doing it in Photoshop, which many of you told me was a bit silly. So yes, thoroughly enjoying that. If you're interested in checking Skillshare out, click the link below in the description, and for a limited time you can get a free trial to Skillshare, and I'd highly recommend you do, because like I said, there are loads of classes in loads of different topics, and yeah, I have found it thoroughly useful. So yeah, check that out. So let's edit this image. Okay, so here it is, and here is the original. Not what came out the camera, obviously, because, well, this is about 15 images stitched together, but this is basically what I had to work with. Now, if you look at the projections that I was given, I think I had to choose cylindrical. I think perspective didn't work for some reason. In any case, this is the crop that I went with, a 4x5, which I think works quite well, given the elements of the image that I wanted to include in the final result. So if I reset this stuff, and we'll go for that 4x5 crop. something like... Sorry, talk amongst yourselves a minute. For the sake of argument, that. Actually, no. The barn's not in the middle there. The barn needs to be right in the centre of the frame for this to work, I think. Look a bit odd if it's just a bit to the left or right. Okay, perfect. First thing I'm going to do is apply one of my presets, High Key Punch Colder, which I don't think is in my pack, but basically it's exactly the same as High Key Punch, except it's just a bit colder. I've just turned the colour temperature down, basically. That's all I've done with that. Why is it not applied? So there we go. That's the first step. And already, actually, I think that's made quite a big difference. It looks quite kind of mysterious and atmospheric, I think. However, I think we can do a bit better. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a gradient, and I'm going to take the exposure down a bit. I'm going to take the temperature down even further, and I'm going to boost the saturation just slightly. Just going to go even further, I think, with the exposure. So that's going to add a little bit more atmosphere, I think. The trouble with that now is that the rest of the image doesn't match that colour. And I don't mean exact colour, I don't want to make the whole image blue, but the greens are nowhere near as vibrant as the sky is blue. So I need to fix that. I'm going to go down to saturation. I'm going to boost up the saturation of the green, but that green looks a little bit too warm for me. So I'm going to go to hue, and I'm going to have a play around with trying to make the green look a bit colder. Something like that. I'm then going to go to luminance, and I'm going to take the brightness of that green up just a touch. I think that's good, but I think I've overdone it on saturation, so I'm going to pull that back. Something like that, I think, looks pretty good. And now I feel like the greens and the blues match in terms of intensity. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a gradient again, and I'm going to go to the bottom of the image, and I'm going to make sure that your eye isn't distracted away from the barn and what's actually happening in the photo by the horrible kind of rocks and just the hillside that's in no way of interest. So I'm going to take the exposure down, then here maybe the highlights and the shadows just a touch as well, and I think that does a pretty good job of drawing your eye away from the areas of the photo that I don't particularly want your eye to go to. I'm now going to do the opposite, so I'm going to grab a radial filter, and I'm going to make sure that the barn and its surroundings are bright enough and contrasty enough. So exposure's up a bit on this radial filter, that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to bring down the blacks a touch, more than anything just for the windows, or the lack of windows in the barn. And I'm going to boost the texture ever so slightly as well. That looks pretty good. I'm then going to take a brush and basically do the same thing again, but specifically just to the barn itself. Take down the brush size. Something like that. That should just help the barn pop a little bit more, I think. The only other thing I need to fix now, well, there's two other things I need to fix. Firstly, the brightness on the road in the distance is, well, it's not bright enough. So, need to add some light over here. Same brush, so just some exposure. I'll bring up the blacks actually, that's unnecessary. But something like that, just so that you can see the entirety of the road. And then the last thing I need to do, I mean, I'm sure I'd do some other tweaks to this photo, but for the sake of demonstration, I'll leave it here. But the last thing I need to do first is go to the heal tool and take away some of these watermarks that were on my lens. I'll just do one of them for the sake of saving you from plenty of boredom if I was to do all of them. I thought, to be honest, they were all going to end up ruining the photo, but actually, I think it's probably salvageable. So that's good. But yeah, this photo, I think, is a bit more about something as opposed to the drone photo that's actually of something. I think, to be honest, the drone photo is a composition that I prefer had I had the same conditions that I have for the panorama. I could have, to be honest, if I'd just put the drone up in the air again. I hadn't used all my battery. But to be honest, when it's raining like that and you put the drone in the air, well, at that point I've become completely convinced that it's going to fall on someone's head and be wet. So I chose not to. I'll probably have to get over that fear, to be honest, because it's going to end up costing me a portfolio photo at some point. But not this time. I don't think this necessarily makes the cut for the portfolio. Over time it might, you never know. Anyway, so yeah, that's how I edited this particular image. Hopefully that was useful. Maybe some of you learned something. On the subject of learning, thank you very much to Skillchef sponsoring this video. Do check it out in the link below. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you next time when I don't get hit by a barrage of drizzle as I did then. Fingers crossed.